I didn't write a resignation letter. I didn't yell. I just placed my badge on Damian Stone's desk, and 24 hours later 15 executives were fired. This isn't a story about emotion. It's about documentation, digital footprints, and a woman who built a fortress the new leadership thought they could bulldoze with buzzwords. My name is Rowan Ellis. For 13 years I architected Vanguard Solutions' risk infrastructure. So robust federal regulators used it as a gold standard. At 39 I'd weathered takeovers, crashes and leadership chaos. But nothing like Damian Stone, the founder's nephew, vaulted into the Chief Innovation Officer role with zero experience and a resume scrubbed of past failures. I arrived that Wednesday at 6:15 a.m., 2 hours early, the executive floor empty. My office was already cleared. For weeks I'd been quietly backing up evidence of irregularities onto encrypted drives. They thought I was compliant. I was building a case. By 7:30 Damian's voice echoed down the hall, loud, performative. I walked into his open office, placed my badge on his presentation slides and said, "I'm resigning." He sputtered about notice periods. "I drafted that contract," I said. "Senior leadership can walk immediately under fundamental restructuring. Section 31, paragraph 7. Before leaving I added, you might review the emergency protocols, especially around system access and succession." In the elevator I texted my attorney, "It's done. Proceed at 9 a.m. precisely." As I stepped into the morning light I knew, the moment my access was revoked, automated risk assessments I'd embedded would activate, flagging every bypassed control, every fraudulent approval, every shortcut they'd taken in their transformation. The taxi driver asked if I'd had a rough morning. "No," I said. "It's been a perfect one." 3 weeks earlier, the unraveling began with a late-night memo. Damian Stone appointed Chief Innovation Officer. Nepotism in corporate drag. By Monday loyal executives were purged. At a so-called transformation meeting, Damian's team pitched dismantling compliance under the guise of agility. I shut it down. Challenging federal regulations carries penalties starting at $15 million per violation. They didn't know I was already watching. Already ready. And they certainly didn't know the system was about to turn on them. One of Damian's lieutenants, Cassandra Wright, VP of Strategic Growth, leaned in with smug certainty. "Risk management should enable business, not obstruct it." "Risk management keeps you from federal prosecution," I shot back. "Care to explain how you evolve beyond the Bank Secrecy Act?" Damian cut in smoothly. "We're creating a new role for you, legacy systems consultant, to help transition the old frameworks. Code 4, we're sidelining you until you quit." "I'll consider it," I said, closing my binder. "In the meantime, I'll need full documentation of all these transformations for the compliance trail." "Of course," he said. His eyes said otherwise. The moment I returned to my office I began exporting files. 13 years of infrastructure meant I still had access to everything. By Wednesday the purge was accelerating. Andrew Chambers, internal audit, Linda Crawford, compliance, Kevin Yong, CTO. All gone or shuffled off under NDAs. But digital records don't sign silence agreements. I started arriving at 5 a.m., leaving past 10 p.m. Security let me be. Even in an amnesiac executive suite, the name Rowan Ellis still carried weight. Thursday night I found it, a buried folder labeled Project Catalyst. Inside, Damian's real plan. Post-oversight decision-making framework. Translation: Act first, deal with the law later. My phone buzzed. Alan Crawford, overseas. "Rowan, you seeing what I'm seeing?" He'd forwarded an email chain. Damian planning to outsource risk management to a Nevada firm. A 45-second search confirmed it was owned by his disgraced ex-business partner. "Whatever you're planning, execute it soon." Friday afternoon, Damian sent an all-staff email. Risk would be optimized for efficiency, starting Monday. My team flooded my office. "Does optimized mean what I think?" James asked. "Update your resumes. All of you." That night I stayed until 2 a.m. copying everything to encrypted drives. Not stealing, just preserving. Damian caught me. "Burning the midnight oil? Protecting your uncle's investment." He tried charm. I cut through it. "Nevada LC, ring any bells?" "Catalyst Consulting." For the first time he faltered. "I know everything. I said. The question is whether you're smart enough to stop before it's irreversible. After he left, I called Helen Turner, audit partner and old ally. Remember that favor from the Riverside audit? I'm calling it in. A forensic team. Monday morning. What are you planning? I'm saving this company, I said, whether it wants to be saved or not. Monday arrived. Damien's team swarmed the executive floor. Tablets in hand, buzzwords on slides. Their centerpiece? A projection titled Post-Oversight Decision Matrix. Hazardous nonsense disguised as innovation. At 9:45 James appeared. Cassandra wants all our risk docs. Tell her to file Form R47, in triplicate. Damien isn't a signatory yet. Bureaucracy. My weapon of delay. By 11 a.m., a new, agile approval platform went live, bypassing 4 authorization layers for transactions under $8M. I called IT. Wesley confirmed. It was built by Catalyst Consulting, piggybacking on our APIs. Then Helen called again. They're filing an amended charter Friday, eliminating your role. And they've revived the assumed continuity override clause from 2008. That expired in 2009. Not in their version. If this passes, they get 120 days of unchecked power. We stop it by Friday, I said. I locked my door and opened my master file. 3 weeks of evidence. But I still needed the smoking gun. At 2 p.m. Damien called an all-hands for my team. They sat tense like they'd been sentenced. He stood at the front, Cassandra at his side. Risk management as we know it is obsolete, he announced. We're not the no department anymore, we're enablement partners. Lawrence asked what that meant. Pre-approved frameworks, Cassandra said. Retroactive documentation. Trust-based verification. So, risk after the fact? Exactly, Damien said like it was genius. Post-oversight decision-making. Act first, optimize for compliance later. I cut in. That violates 18 federal regulations and exposes Vanguard to unlimited liability. Damien smirked. Old paradigms, Rowan. He gestured to a slide labeled Velocity Framework. A swirl of jargon like dynamic compliance and regulatory agility. This is absurd, I said. You can't be agile with federal law. Can't, or won't, he shot back. Which is why, effective immediately, we're restructuring risk. The next slide showed the new org chart. Cassandra as Chief Transformation Officer. Me. Legacy Advisory. Tucked in a corner. My team looked to me. I stood. Before you proceed, Damien, have you read Section 9F of the corporate charter? The part that says fundamental changes to risk require a 3/4 board vote? And that the head of risk is a protected position. We have board approval. You have your uncle's approval. That's 1 vote. Cassandra fumbled through papers. The board delegated transformation authority. To change operations, not governance, I said, writing 9F, continuity of critical functions on the whiteboard. This was written after 2008 to stop exactly what you're doing. Damien flushed. You're clinging to technicalities. I'm citing the law that keeps this company solvent. But hey, go ahead. I'm sure the Fed will love your innovation lab. I walked out, hands steady with fury. At 4 p.m., a message from Alan in Singapore. Check the vendor payment system now. Chaos. Dozens of new vendors. Approved through Damien's Velocity system. No checks. No verification. Money already flowing in $75,000 to $150,000 chunks. All shell companies. All Nevada-based. All tied to Catalyst Consulting. They weren't just gutting risk. They were looting Vanguard. I called Jonathan Vance. Your nephew is about to destroy everything you built. He agreed to meet me. 7 p.m. By 6:45, I'd printed 375 pages of evidence. As I headed for the elevator, Damien intercepted me. Board meeting? I said. There's no board meeting. There is now. He followed me in. My uncle won't listen to you. He built this company from nothing. He'll listen to anyone who can save it. The elevator rose. Damien texted furiously, warning his uncle. Good. Let him be ready. I touched the badge in my pocket. 3 more days. Damien thought he was playing chess, but he didn't know I'd already won. The smoking gun was in the metadata, like it always is. A few days later, reviewing the fake charter amendments, I spotted it. A clause time-stamped March 14, 2008. The real continuity override from the financial crisis. But that clause expired January 31, 2009. Yet here it was, resurrected in a document last modified by Stone at vanguardsolutions.com. Dig deeper. Original author Catalyst_legal, created February 8, 2025. They'd copied it word for word, and altered key phrases. Temporary emergency powers became assumed. Board oversight required, turned into as deemed necessary. And in Section 9F? My veto power as continuity officer had been quietly handed to the Chief Innovation Officer, a title Damien invented for himself. I pulled up the original 2008 document from our blockchain-verified vault. Immutable. Unchanged. Then I found track changes they'd forgotten to delete. Cassandra arguing with someone named Beach, Benjamin Hammond, Damien's disgraced ex-partner. This wasn't incompetence. It was a coordinated takeover, using Vanguard as a piggy bank. I worked through the night. By 5 a.m. I had a 3-inch binder of irrefutable proof. But I needed one last thing. The physical 2008 filing. At 8 a.m. I was at the Secretary of State's office. Florence, the clerk, led me to the archives. 90 minutes later I opened the box and there it was. The signed, initialed expiration clause. These emergency provisions expired January 31, 2009. And cannot be renewed without unanimous board consent. Unanimous. Not a majority. Unanimous. My hands trembled. Not from fear, from certainty. There it was, the original assumed continuity override provision, signed by the board and corporate secretary with the expiration clause bold, underlined and initialed by every signatory. These emergency provisions expired January 31, 2009. And cannot be renewed without unanimous board consent. Unanimous. Not majority. Not 3/4. I photographed every page and requested certified copies. Something important? Florence asked. You could say that. Back at the office, Damien was holding court in the main conference room, pitching paradigm shifts in regulatory philosophy to a room of wide-eyed hires. I walked in without knocking. Rowan, he said, smile sharp. We're in the middle of, I need 5 minutes. It can't wait. I set my binder on the table. It's about the assumed continuity override. Silence. Cassandra paled. The provision in your amended charter? It's fraudulent. The real version expired in 2009. Yours was drafted last month by Catalyst Consulting, without board approval. Cassandra stood. We should discuss this privately. Sit down. I flipped to the next tab. Care to explain why Benjamin Hammond, a man barred from securities work, is editing our governance docs? Damien froze. How did you, metadata, Damien? It remembers everything. I gestured to the binder. Every shell vendor. Every fraudulent transfer. All here. A junior raised a hand. Should we leave? Stay. You should know who you're working for. I turned to Damien. Care to tell them about the $3 million sent to Catalyst? Or the SEC investigation at your last company? You're fired, he snapped. My role is charter protected. Only the full board can remove me, and they meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. I closed the binder. Your uncle already has a copy. So do the auditors. And the FBI. Cassandra typed frantically. Damien stood rigid, his presentation glowing behind him. Oh, and as of this morning, I've invoked real emergency powers under Section 11D. All non-essential spending is frozen. Vendor accounts locked. System access under review. You can't. I just did. I headed for the door. Workshops cancelled. Update your resumes. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. Reporters, board members, lawyers. I ignored them all. I pulled up the risk dashboard. 13 years of infrastructure still standing. Still guarding the company. Damien thought buzzwords could dismantle it. He learned the hard way. Systems fight back. I glanced at my badge in the drawer. 3 more days until I'd leave it on his desk. This was never about revenge. It was about protection of pensions, careers, and the integrity of the whole system. Because risk management isn't it's not on my watch. The burgundy folder in my drawer wasn't just evidence. It was a loaded weapon. Printouts, screenshots, transactions, all cross-referenced and verified. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed allies who understood. This wasn't office politics. It was theft. And I was stopping it. I started with Charlotte Bennett in internal audit. Charlotte was 58, 8 months from retirement, and had zero tolerance for corporate manipulation. I found her in her office at 6:45 a.m., already deep in spreadsheets. Rowan. She looked up over her reading glasses. Let me guess. Damien Stone. I closed her door. How severe is it from your end? Severe. She swiveled her monitor toward me. 31 new vendor accounts in 3 weeks. All approved through this new velocity framework. No documentation, no verification, just Damien or Cassandra's digital signature. Can you trace the money? Some of it. But Rowan, they're intelligent. Small amounts, multiple transfers, everything just under the reporting thresholds. She pulled up another screen. Except for this one. $3 million to something called Phoenix Ventures. Ring any bells? Phoenix. As in Project Catalyst, Damien's transformation initiative. Nevada company. Of course. Incorporated February 2nd. Guess who the registered agent is? Catalyst Consulting. Bingo. Charlotte leaned back. Rowan, I've been doing this for 35 years. This isn't transformation. It's theft. I set a flash drive on her desk. Everything I have is on here. Can you build a financial trail? He pocketed the drive. Give me 48 hours. And Rowan, watch your back. People who steal millions don't appreciate witnesses. My next stop was legal. Not the new hires Damien had brought in, but Olivia Reynolds, Deputy General Counsel who'd been with Vanguard since the company went public. I found her in the law library, a room Damien's team probably didn't even know existed. Rowan. She didn't look up from her research. I was wondering when you'd come. You know what's happening. I know our new Chief Innovation Officer tried to file amended articles of incorporation without legal review. I know he's citing provisions that expired 17 years ago. And I know someone's been accessing our legal databases at 3 a.m. using admin credentials that shouldn't exist. I pulled out a chair. Olivia, I need help understanding something. The continuity officer provisions, are they as ironclad as I think? She finally looked at me and I saw fury in her eyes. Rowan, your position isn't just protected. It's integral to our federal compliance agreements. Remove you without cause, and we trigger automatic reviews from every regulatory body that oversees us. What about the emergency powers? Section 11D. She smiled grimly. Jonathan Vance insisted on that after 2008. The continuity officer becomes the ultimate arbiter during governance crisis. You could literally freeze the entire company if you deemed it necessary. How long would it take them to challenge it? Minimum 90 days through the courts. Longer if you have documented cause. She paused. Which I assume you do. I thought about the Burgundy folder. Extensively documented. Then you're untouchable. Which is why they're trying to eliminate the position entirely. That evening I worked late again, but this time I wasn't alone. Wesley Grant from IT had quietly assigned himself as my technical backup, running traces on every suspicious transaction. Elizabeth from my team was cross-referencing vendor contracts. Even Leonard, the security officer, made extra rounds past my office. Word had spread through the unofficial networks. The administrative assistants, the IT staff, the people who actually made Vanguard function. Damien might have his MBAs and consultants, but I had something more valuable. People who understood how the company really worked. At 9:30 p.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Rowan Ellis speaking. This is Agent Lisa Brennan, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I understand you've submitted a whistleblower complaint. My heart rate accelerated. I have. We'd like to discuss your documentation. Can you meet tomorrow morning? Discreetly. Where? There's a coffee shop on 5th Avenue. The Daily Grind. 7 a.m. After she disconnected, I sat in the darkness for a moment. Once I talked to the FBI, there was no retreating. This would escalate beyond corporate maneuvering into criminal investigation. I pulled out the Burgundy folder and added one more document, a timeline I'd been maintaining. Every meeting, every transaction, every policy change. 3 weeks of systematic dismantling, all leading to tomorrow's board meeting where they plan to eliminate my position and give themselves carte blanche. My desk phone rang. Internal number. Rowan. It was Jonathan Vance. Can you come to my office? It was 10 p.m. The executive level was empty except for security. Jonathan's corner office blazed with light. He was standing at his window looking out at the city. On his desk was a printout of my documentation. 13 years, he said without turning. You've been protecting this company for 13 years. That's my job. Even from my nephew. I chose my words carefully. Especially from people who think they're above the rules. He turned then and I saw a man who'd aged considerably in 3 weeks. Is it as bad as these documents suggest? It's worse. What I've documented is just what they've done openly. The FBI will find more. The FBI? He sank into his chair. Rowan, he's my nephew. And he's stealing from your company, from your shareholders, from every employee who trusted Vanguard with their future. Jonathan picked up the timeline. $3 million to Phoenix Ventures that we can trace. There's probably more through channels we haven't discovered yet. What do you want, Rowan? I want the board to know the truth before they vote on anything tomorrow. I want the audit committee to have full access to all systems. And I want the continuity officer provisions enforced as written. You want to keep your job? No. I met his eyes. I want to do my job. There's a difference. He was quiet for an extended moment. The board meeting tomorrow. You'll present your findings. If you'll permit me. Rowan, I built this company from nothing. I won't let anyone destroy it. Not even my own blood. He stood. 9 a.m. full presentation. Whatever you need. I left his office feeling something I hadn't expected. Sympathy. Jonathan Vance was learning what every parent of a criminal eventually learns. That love and justice don't always align. Back in my office I made final preparations. Copies of everything went to my personal attorney. Another set to Helen Turner's audit team. A third set locked in my desk. The burgundy folder that started it all. At midnight I finally headed home. Tomorrow would bring chaos. FBI interviews, board meetings, probably attorneys descending like locusts. Damien's house of cards would collapse, taking his conspirators with him. But I'd done my job. I'd protected the company even from itself. As I waited for the elevator my phone chimed. A text from an unknown number. You should have taken the legacy advisory position. I deleted it without responding. Threats didn't intimidate me. I had something more powerful than fear. I had 13 years of infrastructure, properly documented processes, and the kind of methodical attention to detail that made criminals slip up. Damien thought he was a disruptor. Tomorrow he'd learn that some things shouldn't be disrupted, like federal law, like fiduciary duty, like the difference between innovation and theft. The elevator arrived. As the doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. In 12 hours, Damien Stone would walk into that board meeting thinking he was about to complete his takeover. Instead, he'd walk into an ambush built from his own arrogance and my burgundy folder full of facts. Some people counted sheep to fall asleep. That night, I counted Damien's legal violations. I stopped at 53, but only because sleep finally took me. Tomorrow would be a very interesting day. The boardroom at Vanguard occupied the entire northeast corner of the 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 35, and portraits of every CEO since the company's founding. It was designed to impress and intimidate. At 8:45 a.m., it was also unexpectedly crowded. I arrived to find Damien's transformation team already setting up. Cassandra Wright was arranging printed slide decks at each seat while 2 assistants tested the projection system. Damien himself stood at the head of the table, hands planted on the polished wood like he owned it. Rowan. His smile was all teeth. Early as always. I was invited, I said, setting my boxes of documentation on the side table. About that. Cassandra stepped forward. The agenda's been revised. Your item has been moved to the end. If there's time. The chairman sets the agenda, I said evenly, not the chief innovation officer. Actually, Damien interjected, as of this morning I'm acting chief. Uncle Jonathan's taking a medical leave. I felt the ground shift under my feet. Medical leave? Stress-related. Doctor's orders. He asked me to step in temporarily. Damien pulled out a letter on letterhead. Effective immediately. I recognized Jonathan's signature, but something was off. The letter was dated yesterday, but Jonathan had seemed fine when we met. Stressed, yes, but hardly incapacitated. How convenient, I said. Isn't it? Damien's smile widened. Now, as acting CEO, I've revised today's agenda. We'll be voting on the restructuring first. Your concerns can wait. The board members began arriving at 8:55. I knew most of them had protected their interests for 13 years. But as they took their seats, I noticed they avoided my eyes. Only Margaret Sutton, the longest-serving board member, gave me a slight nod. Helen Turner entered at 8:59, followed by 3 associates carrying bankers' boxes. Damien frowned. Miss Turner, this is a closed session. I'm here at the invitation of the audit committee, Helen replied smoothly. Miss Sutton. Margaret stood. I've asked Turner and Associates to present preliminary findings from an emergency audit. Given recent concerns about governance. There are no concerns, Damien cut in. We're implementing industry best practices. Mr. Stone, Margaret's voice could have frozen fire. You may be acting CEO, but you are not a board member. Please sit down. Damien's face flushed, but he sat. Cassandra started to speak, but Margaret silenced her with a look. Now then, Margaret continued, before we discuss any restructuring, I believe Ms. Ellis has documentation to present. I stood, my heart steady despite everything. Thank you, directors. What I'm about to show you. The boardroom door burst open. 3 people in dark suits entered, followed by Agent Lisa Brennan, whom I recognized from her voice. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant to secure all documents related to Vanguard's vendor management and approval processes. Chaos erupted. Board members shouted questions. Cassandra Wright went pale as paper. Damien stood so fast his chair toppled. This is harassment, he shouted. My uncle will. Your uncle is in federal custody, Agent Brennan said calmly. He's cooperating fully with our investigation into embezzlement and wire fraud. The room went silent. I felt my knees weaken. Jonathan arrested? That didn't make sense. He was many things but not a thief. Margaret Sutton was the first to recover. Agent Brennan, there must be some mistake. Jonathan Vance made the mistake of trying to protect his nephew. Brennan pulled out a tablet. Last night at 11:23 p.m., Jonathan Vance attempted to transfer $12 million to an offshore account. He was intercepted at the airport. That's impossible, I said. I met with him at 10 o'clock. He was in his office. Until 11:30 p.m. according to building security, Agent Brennan finished. Ms. Ellis, we know you've been documenting irregularities. We'd like to compare your findings with what Mr. Vance confessed. Damien had gone from red to white to gray. Confessed to what? Brennan consulted her tablet. To establishing Phoenix Ventures, to routing Vanguard funds through Catalyst Consulting, to planning to liquidate assets before the board discovered the missing money. Should I continue? He's protecting me, Damien whispered. The old fool is trying to protect me. No, I said, understanding flooding through me. He's protecting the company. Everyone turned to look at me. Jonathan knew the investigation was coming. Knew Damien would be implicated. So he took the blame himself. Made it look like Damien was just following orders. I met Damien's shocked gaze. He's giving you a way out. I don't need a way out. I didn't do anything wrong, Damien's voice cracked. It was just restructuring innovation. I wasn't stealing. Mr. Stone, Agent Brennan interrupted, I'd advise you to stop talking and contact an attorney. Cassandra Wright was already edging toward the door, but an agent blocked her path. Helen Turner cleared her throat. Perhaps we should see Ms. Ellis's documentation now. It might clarify the situation. I opened my first box. Directors, for the past 3 weeks, I've documented systematic attempts to bypass Vanguard's financial controls. For the next hour I laid out everything. Every falsified document, every shell company, every illegal transfer. The board sat in stunned silence as I showed them how their company had nearly been hollowed out from the inside. Damien tried to interrupt twice. Both times Agent Brennan suggested he remain quiet. When I finished, Margaret Sutton spoke first. Ms. Ellis, in your professional opinion, what's our exposure? Assuming we cooperate fully with federal authorities and implement immediate remediation? Minimal. The money can be recovered. The damage to reputation, that's another matter. And if we hadn't discovered this? I looked at Damien. Complete collapse within 6 months. Bankruptcy, federal prosecution, shareholder lawsuits. Vanguard would have ceased to exist. But you did discover it, Margaret said softly. You protected us. Again. Agent Brennan stood. We'll need all documentation transferred to our custody. Ms. Ellis, you'll be deposed as a witness. Mr. Stone, Ms. Wright, please come with us. As the FBI led Damien and Cassandra out, Damien turned back to me. This is your fault. You could have just accepted the new structure. Could have been part of something revolutionary. I was part of something better, I said. I was part of keeping 40,000 employees from losing their jobs because you wanted to play startup founder with other people's money. He was still shouting accusations as the agents escorted him to the elevator. The boardroom slowly emptied until only Margaret Sutton, Helen Turner, and I remained. Rowan, Margaret said quietly. The board will need an interim CEO. Someone who understands the company, who has the trust of regulators and employees. No. I shook my head. I'm not an executive. I'm a risk officer. The best one we've ever had. He studied me. Stay on, Rowan. Help us rebuild. Your terms, your structure. I thought about my badge sitting in my desk drawer, about the resignation I'd planned, about walking away from 13 years of work. I need the continuity officer position strengthened, I said finally. Independent budget, direct report to the board, veto power over any structural changes. Done. And I want a forensic review of every hire Damien made, every contract he signed, every system he implemented. Agreed. One more thing. I met Margaret's eyes. When Jonathan gets out, because he will get out, he can never hold an officer position again. No exceptions. Margaret's face was sad but resolute. I'll make the motion myself. As I packed up my documentation, evidence now for a federal case instead of a corporate one, Helen Turner touched my shoulder. You know what the real irony is, she said. Damien was right about one thing. Vanguard did need transformation. Just not his kind. I looked around the boardroom where 3 weeks of corporate warfare had just ended. We'll transform. But we'll do it legally, ethically. The boring way. The Rowan Ellis way, Helen said. The right way, I corrected. I left the boardroom carrying empty boxes. The FBI had taken everything. My burgundy folder, my timeline, 3 weeks of meticulous documentation. But I didn't need it anymore. The evidence would do its work in court now. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and deleted the resignation letter I drafted. Then I texted my team. All hands meeting at 2 p.m. We have a company to rebuild. Damien thought he was a visionary. Jonathan thought he was a father protecting his son. But I knew what I was. A guardian of boring, necessary systems that kept the world from falling apart. And I was very, very good at my job. 6 months later, I stood in the same executive conference room where Damien had once preached about disruption and transformation. But this time I wasn't fighting for survival. I was building for the future. The quarterly report, Margaret said, sliding the document across the table, is extraordinary. I scanned the highlights. Stock price up 42%. Full recovery of $11.8 million of the stolen $13 million. 0 regulatory violations. Employee satisfaction at a 5-year high. We're being held up as a case study, Harold Preston added. He'd been hired as our permanent chief risk officer. The Wall Street Journal wants to do a feature on the Vanguard recovery. There was no miracle, I said. Just people doing their jobs properly. Margaret smiled. Spoken like a true risk officer. But Rowan, what you built here, what you protected, it matters. Other companies are asking how we did it. Good systems and people who give a damn, I said. It's not complicated. But it had been complicated. The past 6 months had been a masterclass in corporate reconstruction. We'd rebuilt every system Damien had corrupted, strengthened every control he'd bypassed, and created new safeguards that would have made his scheme impossible. The Ellis protocols, someone had nicknamed them. I hated the name, but it stuck. At 2 p.m., I had my weekly check-in with Agent Brennan. The FBI had maintained a small presence at Vanguard, following the money trails that kept revealing new tentacles of Damien's network. Any word? I asked, though I knew the answer. He's in Costa Rica, she said. At least that's where we traced his last transaction. No extradition treaty. And the money? Living well from what we can tell. Benjamin Hammond is with him. They're calling themselves consultants now, offering corporate transformation services to companies in Latin America. I laughed despite myself. Still selling the same snake oil. Some people never learn. Brennan paused. But Rowan, we did recover another $800,000 from a Cayman account. The paperwork should clear next month. That's $12.6 million recovered out of $13 million stolen. Not bad. Your systems caught another attempt last week, Brennan added. Different group, same playbook. They didn't get past the first firewall. The Alice protocols, I said dryly. Whatever you call them, they work. After Brennan left, I found myself in the break room. The same one where 8 months ago employees had whispered about Damien's transformation plans with a mixture of fear and excitement. Now the conversations were different. Normal. People discussing weekend plans, complaining about the coffee, living their lives without fear of sudden termination. James found me there. Rowan, you've got a visitor. Who? He says you'll want to see him. Curious, I followed James to the lobby. Standing by the security desk, looking older and grayer than I'd ever seen him, was Jonathan Vance. Rowan. His voice was quiet. I know I'm not welcome here, but I had to ask you something. I nodded to Leonard, who discreetly moved away. You have 5 minutes. I've been following the recovery. Seeing what you've built, how you've protected the employees, the shareholders. He stopped, composed himself. I spent 40 years building Vanguard. Damien nearly destroyed it in 3 weeks. You saved it. How? You want the real answer? He nodded. I didn't trust him. I met his eyes. From day one something felt wrong. So I documented everything. Built redundancies into the systems, created tracking mechanisms he didn't even know existed. I prepared for war while everyone else was celebrating transformation. But why? What made you suspicious? I thought about it. He never asked questions. In 13 years, every executive I've worked with asked questions about risk, about consequences, about compliance. Damien never did. He had all the answers before he walked in the door. That's not transformation. That's a con. Jonathan's shoulders sagged. I should have seen it. You're his uncle. You saw what you wanted to see. And you? I'm a risk officer. I see what's there. He turned to leave, then stopped. Rowan, the board has asked me to formally transfer my remaining shares to the employee trust. $18 million worth. I wanted you to know. That's generous. It's necessary. Those employees deserved better than what my nephew tried to do to them. This is the least I can offer. He paused at the door. Take care of Vanguard, Rowan. You're its guardian now. After he left, I stood in the lobby for a moment, processing. 8 months ago I'd walked through these same doors planning to quit. Now I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The afternoon brought one final surprise. A package delivered to my office. No return address. Inside was a single item. A coffee mug with "World's Most Boring Risk Officer" printed on it. No note, but I recognized Cassandra Wright's handwriting on the shipping label. She was serving 4 years minimum security, cooperating fully with authorities. The mug was probably her idea of an apology. Or maybe a peace offering. I set it on my desk next to my official Chief Compliance and Integrity Officer mug. The contrast made me smile. At 5 p.m. I gathered my things and prepared to leave. But first I had one last ritual. I pulled out my employee badge. The same one I'd carried for 13 years, the one I'd almost left on Damien's desk that morning that now felt like a lifetime ago. It was just a piece of plastic with my photo and a magnetic strip. But it represented something more. Trust, responsibility, the boring, essential work of keeping systems honest and companies ethical. I clipped it to my jacket and headed for the elevator. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always people looking for weaknesses, shortcuts, ways to game the system. But tonight I was content knowing that Vanguard was stronger than it had ever been. In the elevator I thought about Damien, probably sitting in some Costa Rican cafe, still convinced he was a visionary brought down by small minds. He'd never understand that his failure wasn't about innovation versus tradition or disruption versus stability. It was about something much simpler. You can't build a future by destroying the foundation. The elevator opened to the lobby. Leonard waved goodnight. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy. Millions of people trusting that the systems would work, that their pensions were safe, that someone somewhere was watching the watchers. I walked into the evening crowd, just another corporate employee heading home after another day at the office. Nobody would write breathless articles about what I did today. No one would call me a visionary or a disruptor. I was something better. I was the person who made sure the lights stayed on, the paychecks cleared, and the predators stayed outside the gates. Damien had left his badge on the desk as a symbol of defeat. I wore mine as a badge of honor. The system had worked. The company had survived. The Guardian had done her job. And tomorrow I'd do it all over again. The boring way. The right way. The only way that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts about Rowan's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And if you really want to help others discover this story, hit that support button to boost it to more listeners. Your support means everything.